Going to do some breaking news out of Canberra now relating to the immigration detention saga. Our political editor, Andrew Clarnell, has some new details for us. Andrew, what is it that you've learned about the talks that have been going on between the government and the opposition on this matter?
Morning, Ash. Well, a row has opened up between the government and opposition over the peculiar question of whether or not the opposition wants to get legal advice from the government about why it feels after a High Court decision it's had to release so many criminal immigration detainees. It all began with what I put to Shadow Attorney General Michaelia Cash on Sunday Agenda, that the Attorney General Mark Dreyfus had offered to provide a briefing with the government's legal advice on why they had to release 149 detainees in December, and the opposition declined to show up to it.
You would assume that a government that is releasing hardcore criminals out onto the street has Solicitor General's advice. They offered us a briefing on AGS advice that they had specifically
fair
drafted.
enough, but why didn't you take it up?
For the purposes, we said that we would. I wrote back and said, yes, we would. And then do you know what happened? The Attorney General made it almost impossible for Mr Tehan and I to undertake the briefing. They required Mr Tehan to undertake a 7-hour round trip to sit in a room, and guess what? Neither of us could even speak about the advice once we'd seen it. But this was not a briefing that was going to be done in good faith. But
why was it a 7-hour round trip? Sorry. Why was it a 7-hour round trip?
He was in his electorate office and he was told to see the legal advice, he had to drive into Victoria. And we said, well, hey, hold on, just provide it to him by way of a document.
But wouldn't, you know, it's such an important issue, clearly, for the country and certainly for the opposition. Why wouldn't Dan Tehan do that if that was the only way of seeing the advice? And why couldn't you do that at the very least?
Hold on, as I said, we accepted the briefing. The logistics that were put in place by the government. We had set out, send it to Dan, he'll sit in a room quietly by himself, we'll read it. Andrew, we were unable to then do anything with the advice. But
I've got more on this, and can you believe this stuff, all this squabbling between opposition and government over this? Assistant Minister Malindira McCarthy was doubling down on this argument the government doesn't want to see, the opposition doesn't want to see the legal advice this morning.
We know that the opposition are using national security as a political tool and a political ploy. They haven't sought a briefing on what's actually going on with the Home Affairs area. They haven't sought a briefing from the Minister for Immigration, Andrew Giles. OK, so Sky News has now obtained this letter sent yesterday from Michaelia Cash, Dan Tehan and James Paterson, the opposition spokespeople, to Clare O'Neil, Andrew Giles and Mark Dreyfus, where they asked for another briefing now, and they've yet to receive a response at the time of going to air. The letter says, we note your government is now running arguments that the coalition is refusing to be briefed in relation to your government's mishandling of immigration detainees. This is disingenuous. As you know, we accepted a briefing on these matters in December last year, but it rapidly became apparent your offers were not made in good faith, given that you launched public attacks on the coalition over a refusal to engage at the same time as negotiations over the logistics of a briefing were ongoing. It's very disturbing to learn there is the risk further detainees will be released on your government's watch, and that your public response appears to be to blame the courts and now the coalition in relation to a refusal to be briefed. So we write now to seek a briefing on recent developments in relation to your government's further mishandling of released immigration detainees and upcoming cases in the High Court. Specifically, we write to seek a briefing on the government's proposed approach to the ASF 17 case listed for a hearing in the High Court on 17th of April and the proposed legislation that the government intends to introduce in relation to that. They go on, we're happy to make ourselves available for a briefing ahead of question time today. So that never happened. The saga goes on. The opposition's yet to receive a response to that, as I said. And this issue is going to get more and more heated in this parliament, Ash.